Thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. We are actually, what I really wanted to do today is to treat this really isn't meant as a sales webinar, it's really meant as an educational one. So I want to really arm everyone with information so you can better understand merchant processing. It's an area that I've been involved with for over 3 decades. It's still quite confusing, quite frankly. There's a lot of players, there's a lot of pieces, there's a lot of fees, there's a lot of confusion. And my goal today is to clear up some of the confusion, or if I don't do a good job, I may confuse you even more. So Joel, you'll have to let me know if I'm confusing more or if I'm clarifying more.
I will. Hey, to get started, let me throw a poll question out. Do you know your current rate? We can kind of start gathering some information from you guys if you're aware of what your current rate is.
Yeah, and that's a great question, and it's actually a bit of a loaded question as well. So that's an excellent question. All right, so let me go ahead and share my screen. And as soon as I share my screen, and this webinar is being recorded, I believe. So if any of you need to leave early or want to refer back to it, just let us know. All right, so as we mentioned before, the theme of this webinar is clearing the confusion of merchant processing. And we're just going to literally delve right into it. So I tend to call the merchant processing world a big onion because, and in fact, I'm starting to use that term for a lot of technology out there. The credit card world is notorious for having layers and layers of different players, different companies, different banks. So let's try to peel away some of these onion layers and help you understand what's involved within a credit card processing transaction from the point of literally a consumer providing a card to you and you processing that transaction. So what I want to start with is to talk a little about who the players are when it comes to a transaction that's actually processed. And this is important for you to understand because, even though many of you on this webinar, you may be savvy enough and you understand your statements, but you may not understand all of the different players that are involved when it comes to credit card transactions. So of course we start with, the actual customer, and you're the merchant, so you know who that is. Pretty much you're dealing with a payment gateway. You have to, because whatever software you're using to take that credit card, whether it be an online credit card or not, you're dealing with a payment gateway. You've got the processor that's actually processing the card, which goes through the card network. And then it goes to what we call the bank, the issuing bank, and then it goes to through the card network again to the acquiring bank, back to the merchant, and then of course the customer receives their goods and services, assuming all of that whole transaction process worked well. So Joel, are you confused yet?
Not yet. If my face starts drooping, that's when you'll know.
Okay, well, I'm still a little confused. So let's break this. let's break this down. Since you figured it out, I'm still confused. All right, so let's break it down a little more. So first of all, the cardholder, which is the customer, that's pretty self-explanatory, but just in the general world of credit cards, there's 2 types of customers that they deal with. One is considered a transactor, one is considered a revolver. Obviously the revolver, and pardon the pun, we're not talking about the firearm revolver, which many of you on this webinar handle, but we're talking about a revolving credit card, right? So the banks ultimately who make all the money from the credit card transaction, they prefer obviously the revolving credit card holder. So that's just a little piece of information. probably not overly relevant to speaking about, your merchant processing. So the merchant, of course, is you. So you are the entity that is accepting the credit card from the card holder, right? And then we talk about the acquiring bank, right? So typically you're dealing with what's called, there's an issuing bank and there's an acquiring bank. Let me explain what the acquiring bank is first. So the acquiring bank is actually the bank that is receiving the payment authorization request, right? So when you're processing that credit card, it's going to a gateway. That gateway is communicating to the card network, the Visa, MasterCard, and then it's communicating to the acquiring bank that your account is underwritten with, right? So all of you have filled out these long credit card applications, and you've gone through what's called the risk assessment, and all of that is done through the acquiring bank, because the acquiring bank is the first bank that actually sees that transaction request. And it's really just a transaction request, right? So that card holder comes in, provides a credit card. That credit card information is transmitted securely via the gateway, communicated through the card network, and ultimately the acquiring bank is then receiving that authorization request, and it says, hey, I see this request, now I need to go to, and I'll kind of skip here, back to here. So this acquiring bank, right, is obtaining approval from what's called the issuing bank, right? So the issuing bank is actually the bank that issued that particular credit card, okay? So that's what the acquiring bank. So the acquiring bank is really who you're dealing with at the end of the day, and you're dealing with them through a third party, because you're typically not working, even though you get money in your bank account, right? So you may be banking with First Citizens Bank, as an example. So that's a regional bank that you, as a business owner, have your business account with. But your credit card transaction is actually, the money is deposited into your business account, but it's actually going through that acquiring bank. And to get to the acquiring bank, you've got to deal through a service provider. And that service provider is whatever processing company that you're working with, and there's quite a few of them out there, some big ones, some small ones. Some acquiring banks are actually service providers. Chase is a good example of that. Now, in the firearms industry, which is what our audience is focused on, there's a lot of acquiring banks that won't underwrite credit card business for this industry. And I know everyone likes to jump and say, well, it's a political statement. A lot of times it's actually not. Some banks won't even underwrite merchant services for furniture companies, just because furniture takes a really long time, from order to delivery. So it's all about risk and the bank's assessment, of that risk factor. Now, let's not be naive. We all know that banks, high tech, big tech companies are making very political statements. And certainly, if you think about it, the firearms industry is actually a very low risk transaction. It's one of the least risky transactions, simply because you certainly know who your customer is. It's called KYC, know your customer, right? So unfortunately, as much as we'd like to think that, this is more of a risk factor why they may not underwrite you, it's a lot of times, more often than not, in this particular industry, it is unfortunately a political statement. But that's the acquiring bank. And then there's your service provider that, again, is basically providing, it's the arm of the acquiring bank that actually provides the credit card services to you and the terminals, so whomever you're receiving your statements from, that's considered your service provider. Again, typically your service provider is not your acquiring bank, but they could be one and the same. right? And then, of course, we've got the actual credit card network, and that's Visa and MasterCard, Discover, American Express. Those are all part of that credit card network. There's a small number, of entities that actually provide branded credit cards. So those are the major ones: Visa, MasterCard, Discover, and American Express. And they actually are responsible for what we call the interchange rates, and I'll explain all of that in a minute. So basically, in the transaction process, the network receives the credit card payment details from that acquiring processor, and it forwards those details to the actual bank that issued the credit card. So let me step back over to our first little slide, and now we can go through it. At least we know some of this terminology. So again, your credit card transaction, it's going from you, the merchant, to that payment gateway. The payment gateway communicates back to the processor, and sometimes that processor is the payment gateway, but sometimes it's not. And that's important to know, because a lot of times that could also affect your cost, right? So some processors have their own developed gateway, and some of them use a third-party gateway, and at the end of the day, they're going to pass that cost to you, one way or another. Now, of course, there's also cost. Even if you develop your own gateway, you've got to maintain it, you've got to enhance it. So there is always a cost, no matter whether you're using a third-party gateway or not. But it's also good to know, because, layers don't just mean extra costs. Layers a lot of times mean extra headaches. Who do I get support from? Who can really help solve a problem? So the idea of, what we tend to refer to as unifying and simplifying, the more layers you can eliminate, and the more layers we can eliminate for you, the better off everyone is, right? It becomes usually less costly, and it also becomes less of a support headache. All right, so the payment gateway sends that transaction to that processor, which again could be one and the same. It communicates to Visa, Amex, Discover, whatever card brand it is. That network communicates to the actual bank that issued the credit card to say, hey, is this customer in good standings? Do they have enough on their credit limit? And then the issuing bank communicates back to the card network, right? So they're going to say, okay, this card, it's Ezra's card. He is asking for a $100 transaction. Looks like he's paid on time, and he has a balance that's less, that an open balance or available that will cover that $100. So therefore, this transaction is pretty much zero risk. So I'm going to let the card network, meaning I'm going to let Visa, let's say if it's a Visa card, know that, yes, this card is okay. And then Visa then says, all right, back to that acquiring bank, which is the merchant bank, right? The merchant credit card acquiring bank, not your business account bank. But it communicates back to that acquirer to say, okay, that card was good. And at that point, really the gateway comes into play, because it says, okay, I got an authorization, and typically that receipt will get printed and the customer can walk out the door. If this is an online transaction, of course, the transaction gets approved and the customer can check out. So that's the cycle. That's the life cycle of a credit card transaction.
So Ezra,
yes.
Is it fair to say that the more stops that process makes, that's where the fees are injected?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a safe assumption, because everyone has to get a piece of the pie. So, and this is where costs start building. And at the end of the day, unfortunately, it's the merchant that has to eat those costs. That's just how the world is, and I wish I could fix a lot of this. And Joel, I'm glad you asked, because it's impossible to eliminate any of these layers, just so you understand. So companies are trying to eliminate some of the layers by maybe becoming not just the gateway, but also the bank, also the acquiring bank potentially. And we'll talk about, well, I can mention it now, but that's where, for example, Square and PayPal, and Stripe, they're trying to eliminate some of that, some of those layers, because they kind of combine all of that into their processing. But at the end of the day, behind the scenes, this is what's happening. No matter whose name you associate, doesn't matter if, the acquirer might be the actual, they may own the payment gateway, that acquirer name. They may own the processor, but at the end of the day, you're still dealing with, multiple hops to process one credit card transaction. I mean, it's pretty mind-boggling if you think about it, and how fast all of this happens. If you look at this and think about, wow, it took 2 seconds to get that approval code. That's pretty amazing, because it's going through layer upon layer to get that card processed.
Yeah, that is amazing. Hey, so I'm going to throw this answer up because I think this is eye-opening. Do you know your current rates? 26% say no.
Yeah, and that's where the confusion really happens. And for those who say yes, I would actually maybe challenge that.
I would even say I could find probably 2 to 3 fees you didn't even know you were paying.
Yeah, that's the problem. So let's keep talking about that. So Aaron joined us. I think we had a couple of technical issues, but Aaron is our COO, and he actually is the literally the feet on the ground when it comes to credit card processing. I used to be the expert, and Aaron has now taken over, and he's taught me a thing or two. So Aaron, well, before I kind of move on from this slide, was there anything you wanted to comment about, the actual transaction process here?
Yeah, I think, the biggest thing that merchants really face, and, where it really dings them on a cost standpoint, is that, where we look at this chain where it's the card network's also initiating and causing those rise in prices at the customer level. So when a credit card company, like a Visa or MasterCard or American Express, release a new card with, 1.5%, cash back on every transaction, unfortunately, who's paying and funding for those services? The merchant. So that's where the driving force is coming. So the prices are coming from both the consumer end by the card network. So the card network really is, squeezing us, from both directions to try to get every penny possible.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And as many years as I've been in this, I didn't realize who is paying, for those special cards. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes here. We'll talk about all of the fees, and we'll talk about, some of the other concepts here. So if there's no questions in terms of who the players are and a little bit of the transaction flow, I want to continue on and talk about the actual steps, which is really breaking down the process that we just talked about and explaining what the steps are when it comes to that credit card process, because it boils down to 3 separate steps that happen. So I'm just going to bore you all with even more information. So now that we kind of understand what the process of transacting a credit card is, let's dig into this even a little more. For anyone interested, if you do want to get a copy, of this presentation, definitely drop us a note. You are able to chat during the webinar, throw out some questions, interrupt us. We have people monitoring.
Yep, I'm answering questions as we speak.
Yeah, that's perfect. And again, we'll be glad to share this information, and we're still learning, about, this whole world of card processing. And in order for us to really do a good job and provide you with good services, we obviously need to be experts, but you as a merchant, if you can educate yourself, the more you can educate yourself, the better questions you can ask. And hopefully at the end of the day, you can make sure that, you're not overpaying for certain services. So I'll just break it down a little more into these 3 steps, and most of this should now sound familiar. But the first step in terms of credit card transaction is actually the authorization, right? So the authorization, the merchant is just obtaining that approval for payment from the issuing bank, right? So this is just a little different way of looking at, the steps. So again, you've got your card holder who's providing a card to the merchant. Step 2, the merchant via the payment gateway, again, it starts with either a terminal or online. You're sending over those credit card details to the acquiring bank. The acquiring bank forwards the credit card details to the credit card network. And again, at that point, the network communicates back to the issuing bank and says, I need an authorization. So those are the steps for authorizing a card. You'll notice we actually mention that the card information that's sent over, obviously, if it's a card not present transaction, it could include a lot more information. But even with card present transactions, a lot of the gateways now allow you to communicate more information. And in fact, we list here just the card number, expiration date, billing address, there's potentially shipping address, card security code, and the payment amount. But there's a lot more information that can be communicated to the actual respective payment gateway, which then gets communicated over to the issuing bank. And again, the whole purpose of communicating that information is to reduce the likeliness of fraud. And obviously, credit cards is a huge fraud attractor. There's a lot of cases of fraud. Unfortunately, I was involved many years ago, not involved as in part of, I was a victim of, or my customers were, one of the first breaches of a credit card gateway server. And this goes back, I think it was literally about 20 years ago. So, credit card companies have been fighting fraud and have been fighting, we constantly hear of data breaches, even to this day. And we constantly hear of credit card numbers being exposed and compromised. And it's obviously part of that cost factor is because there is so much fraud potential. And the banks have to assess a certain cost to that risk that they're taking. So again, that's the authorization part. The next step is really the authentication. So the authentication, so the authorization is I'm going back to that card holder's bank, the issuing bank, and saying, hey, I need an authorization. At that point, the issuing bank is going to literally check that card, check that account. If necessary, it checks the address. If it's card not present, checks the CVV, and then it communicates back to the credit card network, who then communicates back to the acquiring bank, who then communicates through the gateway back to the merchant, and the merchant communicates back to that card holder. Okay, so that's step 2, even though I said step 1 here, but it is step 2.
Hey, before you go to step 3, I'm going to throw another poll up. Are you PCI compliant with your current processor?
Another good question. All right, so step 3 is really our settlement step. Right, so just because you got an approval doesn't mean you're getting the money in the bank, and that's also important. So basically, and again, I know you probably all know this, but sometimes I think maybe people scratch their heads. Well, why can't I get the money immediately? Right? If the issuing bank already approved that card, why isn't that money hitting my bank account? And also, what money is hitting my bank account, right? So basically, you, the merchant, either automatically or manually, you actually initiate the closing of a day, right? And basically, the way the banks work is that they're batching all of these transactions together. And you basically have one chance a day to submit a batch of transactions. So the process of settlement is step 1. The merchant sends the batch of approved transactions to the acquiring bank. The acquiring bank then forwards that batch to the credit card network. Credit card network sends each approved transaction to the respective issuing bank. So really, this picture here showing the one bank really should be multiple banks, right? Because each card is issued by a different bank. So it's, again, just confirming that transaction again. The issuing bank then transfers the funds to the acquiring bank, but before it sends those funds over, it's taking out what's called interchange fees. And I'll explain what interchange fees are in a second. But bottom line is if it was a $100 sale, it's going to take out, that whatever, let's say 1.5%. And don't quote me on that. All right, so once that issuing bank then transfers the funds, credit card network pays the acquiring bank, and it takes a fee. So maybe these should be in red, right? So I got fees taken off here because the issuing bank is taking out fees. And then I've got fees over here because the credit card network is taking out fees, right? And then the acquiring bank, guess what? They're taking out fees. Slam, slam, slam.
We need to start a fee business.
I know. Look, I never said this is going to be a happy webinar. But again, it's good to know, right? I mean, this is, everyone thinks, hey, it's Visa, MasterCard, they're making all the money. Actually, they're not, believe it or not. They're making a small piece. Everyone's making a small piece. The issuing bank is actually the lion's share of that transaction, right? And we'll talk about fees in a minute here. All right, so again, we went from the issuing bank takes their fees, sends the money through the network. The network then says, okay, I've got that, Visa, MasterCard, whoever it is, I've got that approval. The bank took their fees. Now I'm going to take out my fee, and then I'm going to send that over to the acquiring bank, right, which is your processor. And your processor may or may not be your acquiring bank. For example, TSYS is one that's very common in this industry. TSYS is not an acquiring bank, they're a processor. And then you've got layers in front of TSYS. You've got independent sales organizations. So lots of layers, right? So the acquirer, basically, the acquiring bank credits the merchant less whatever rate you negotiated with them, and then the issuing bank posts the transactions to the card holder, and that appears on their monthly statement. So typically, if you're a card holder, you'll see the transaction during the day, it's pending, but then it actually goes from pending to an actual charge once that settlement process happens. So that's step 3.
So Ezra, we got our poll answered here, and 81% said yes, they are compliant. 18% ask what is PCI compliant. So I'm assuming you'll go over that here pretty soon.
I don't know if it was in my. Oh, actually, it is in one of my lists. So yeah, we'll address that. We'll definitely address it briefly. And what is our webinar schedule? Is this an hour webinar?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So guess what? We're at the point where we're going to talk about what all of these fees are, right? So let's talk about interchange fees. Okay. So this is the fee that's paid to the actual bank that issues the credit card. And it is actually a published fee amount. You can look up interchange costs, and you can find, you can actually find, and we can provide links to the interchange costs. I'll explain those in more detail. But
you can literally just Google it. You can literally just Google Visa interchange rates, MasterCard interchange rates, and the first results usually are the results for those charges.
So Visa, MasterCard, you know, they update their rates twice a year. And most interchange, that when we talk about interchange rates, again, it's the cost of processing that credit card, but it's not the entire cost. It is it's definitely the bulk of the cost that the issuing bank is going to receive. And if you look at an interchange schedule, payment schedule, and I've got a couple of examples, it's pretty daunting because there's so many different permutations. I'll go through and explain why. But typically, when you look at an interchange rate, there's two elements to that rate. There's the actual percent, right? Which typically, you know, that percentage is going to the issuing bank, and then there's typically the fixed fee amount, which is going to that to the actual network. It's what's going to Visa or MasterCard. So for instance, you know, the per swipe fee might be 2.35% plus 15 cents. Again, don't get caught up in the numbers. I'm just throwing some numbers in here as an example. So in this case, 2.35%, if you look, that percent is actually going to the actual issuing bank, right? And then the 15 cents is going to Visa, MasterCard. So interchange fees, they vary, and it varies based on several different factors, right? So if you pull up, so Aaron mentioned you can go Google and look up interchange. It's interesting to look at. It's very confusing. You'll see hundreds of lines, right? And then different descriptions. And again, I'll show you an example in a second. But basically, what they do is based on industry, based on whether the card was present or not, based on who the credit card company is, based on the type of credit card. Is it a business card? Is it a consumer card? Is it a rewards card? And based on actually your industry, there's specific costs, right? So you'll see hundreds of different costs. Only a few of those would apply to you, right? You'll see costs for hospitality, for hotels. You know, if you look at the interchange rates, again, I think they create them to be confusing because, you know, when things are confusing, it's just easy to say, well, I'm not going to worry about it. But basically, what you're looking for is just essentially the retail credit card processing fees, and you can look for card present, card not present. But again, you can get caught up because you'll see that there's different rates for, you know, if it was a business card or if it was a personal card or if it's a rewards card, etc. So your cost, meaning the interchange cost, literally varies tremendously, you know, from one person to the next. So I can buy $100 worth of goods, and Aaron can come in and buy the same $100 worth of goods from the same store. I carry a First Citizens credit card, Visa credit card, and Aaron carries a First Citizens, or he carries his Amex rewards card, and obviously those rates will vary tremendously. So I just pulled an example, you know, of just a statement with some rates that you'll see. These are just the different types of cards. Again, this is just a small representation. In this case, we've got some MasterCards, we've got some Visa cards. You'll see there's different levels of rewards cards, and each one has a different varying rate. If you notice down on the bottom, I've got an international business, sign business, corporation, or purchasing card, which carries even a higher rate. That's, to me, a little odd. I would think those are even less risky, but maybe there's more room and opportunity to charge more to corporations. So, you know, and again, I don't remember if these are accurate rates. You know, I don't remember which year, you know, necessarily I pulled these from. So again, they change twice a year. So don't, I mean, you can screenshot it, but don't take this as gospel. I literally just pulled some miscellaneous numbers here. But you'll see again, you've got, you know, merit cards on the MasterCard side, and they vary. Look at the difference in cost. cost. 1.58% is the card present transaction. 1.58% is the interchange cost, right? But 1.89%, for this different type of merit card, that's a significant difference. If you look at it, that's a 20% difference in cost. And again, you can jump tremendously. So, when you hear, someone saying, yeah, my rate is 1.6%, you got to scratch your head and say, really? Where are you getting that from? And we'll talk about that a little more in a second here. So
let me jump in real quick.
I
wanted to give you a chance to maybe talk about some fees that people don't know about, but I think everybody knows about the interchange fees, maybe. The next poll question is, do you know your monthly fees? So I'm going to throw that up while you continue on.
Yeah, so I know everyone knows what interchange fees are for most people, but I think it's good to delve into it some more because, again, this will help you understand your statements better, and it will help you understand what your true costs are. So here's another little table that I put together that's showing, some differences in interchange costs, but I also have a column here for the swiped/dipped. Dipped means, the chip reader, the EMV. They refer to that as dipping a card because you're dipping it into the reader. So whether it's swiped or dipped, it's the same rate. Again, I think at some point this probably will change because a dip transaction potentially is more secure. In theory, less risky. That's why they push EMV. But you'll notice again the difference in the prices. The Visa MasterCard portion of the fee is the same. It's 10 cents, 10 cents. But you'll notice the varying percent cost, where a basic credit card might be 1.51%, versus a keyed one, if you've got an e-commerce site, it's 1.8%, right? So basically, these are the costs, right? This is the interchange costs that we're looking at. So the big question, why are interchange rates so high, right? Why are we paying, 1.5%, 2%? The issuing bank is already getting money from that customer, right? The end user, the consumer is already paying interest. Well, the banks are the ones obviously making the money, and their reasoning for the interchange rates is it reflects the level of risk associated with the given transaction type, right? So fees for credit card transactions are particularly high because the issuing bank has to loan the funds to the consumer to complete the transaction and then hope that this loan will be repaid on time. But actually, they hope that it's not because then they charge interest. So I did not write this. I'm just quoting this. Obviously there is a risk factor, and everyone, we're in a capitalistic, thank God, a capitalistic world, and everyone needs to make a profit. So of course there's also the profit factor for the issuing bank, and basically it's just non-negotiable. These rates are, these are the costs of doing business, right? It's being able to take credit cards. You've got to accept the costs associated with credit cards, and you can't do business without taking credit cards. So it's something that, basically you either have to build into your pricing structure, or, you could charge what's called convenience fees. I think we'll probably want to have a follow-up webinar to talk about convenience fees and whether or not you're allowed to charge them and under what circumstances and how you can do it. So Joel, maybe put a poll question out there if people would be interested in a webinar that talks even a little more deeper and specifically goes over, convenience fees and what you as a merchant are able and legally allowed to do to recoup some of these costs. To me, what's sad is that these reward programs that are pushed by all of the banks, at the end of the day, you, the merchant, are paying for them, literally. And you'll see, these reward, it's significantly higher I mean, you're paying up to 0.5% more per transaction, for a rewards card. So the merchant, you're bearing the burden of these wonderful rewards cards that we all love points, right? And it blew me away. I literally did not fully understand that till pretty recently. Maybe it's something I tried to avoid. I've always looked at these interchange rates, but it never really hit me. It's the merchant. Wow. You, the merchant, are paying for these reward programs, and yet the bank is the hero. A little backwards. Okay, so get off my soapbox. So the other fees that are again, they're non-negotiable. So interchange, non-negotiable. Assessment fees are non-negotiable. So Amex doesn't charge an assessment fee, but the other networks, Visa, MasterCard, Discover, they do charge what's called an assessment fee. And it's usually based on a percentage of the total transaction volume for the month. So that's a fee that you won't necessarily see in your daily, right? Just to confuse things even more, a lot of times those assessment fees are taken out, on a monthly basis, right? And they can vary. Visa might charge 0.11% assessment plus a, near 2 penny cost for processing, right? Or usage fees. So typically when you look at your interchange assessment, fees, and if you look at everything, the two combined, the two main fees combined, you are basically accounting for 80 or more % of your processing costs. So that's the bulk of the cost. And guess what? Nobody can negotiate that. So if someone's coming in and saying, well, we can do a 1.2% card present transaction, red flag, red flag, red flag. Right? Don't just believe. I mean, there's so many used car salespeople in the credit card industry, and I'm trying not to insult used car salespeople, but notice I said salespeople, Joel, and not salesmen.
Did Joel jump on the PC wagon this week that I didn't realize?
Yeah, I don't know.
Hey, so 33%, you do not know your monthly fee. So for those 33%, I would strongly encourage you to pay attention to our special deal that we're going to offer during this webinar. And we should be able to help you out understanding those fees and maybe even beating whatever it is that you're paying now.
Yeah. So remember, we talked about the issuing bank, right? They make their money from the interchange rate. We talked about the network, right? The Visa, MasterCard, they're making the money from a portion of the interchange fees and the actual assessment fees, right? So the next, remember, think back to our original chart, right? We have the acquiring bank. So how do they make money? Well, they're going to charge you. And that's really your negotiated rate that you have currently. The acquiring bank and the processing company, they've got to make their money, right? Because, they carry some risk. They're the ones providing you with equipment. They're the ones that are supporting you. So, of course, they have a whole infrastructure to support. A lot of times they're providing the gateway service. You can sign up to a gateway on your own. You don't have to use that processor's gateway, right? That's what Authorize.net is. Authorize.net is a gateway that you can sign up to and, hook back up to, many different processing companies, right? It's just another piece in the puzzle. And in fact, a lot of processing companies use gateways that are not theirs. I mentioned that earlier. So the rate that you're paying is whatever the interchange and assessment costs, but added to it is some profit, right? On that these acquiring banks and acquiring processors. Again, there's no way around it. At the end of the day, as long as you're not in a situation, which we've seen many situations where you're way overpaying, jumping between different processors a lot of times doesn't necessarily save you money. They'll sell you on the fact that it will save you a ton of money, but it behooves you to do your homework and dig into things as much as you can. So the markup fees, again, is what the processor is charging. Now, the markup fees is markup fees for that transaction, but there's a lot of other fees. And this is a picture I took before the webinar of Joel. And if you see him now, I mean, he's lost all his hair after he saw all these fees happening. So again, we've got gateway fees, we've got statement fees, we've got PCI compliance fees, we have PCI non-compliant fees, we've got account management fees, we have risk fees, we have batch header fees, we have paper statement fees, and the list probably goes on, right? And you have qualified card fees and non-qualified card fees, and it's literally, it can make your head spin. And I truly believe that's by design, right? Because the more complex something is, the more you, the merchant, you don't have the time, the energy, or the desire to really dig into it to figure out, okay, at the end of the day, what is all of this stuff? Now, we mentioned the word PCI. The PCI compliance, it started many years ago. It really was a way to ensure that you're conducting credit card transaction business in a safe way that won't lead to having compromised cards. In other words, if you talk to your processor, hopefully they told you don't ever write a card number down. That's against PCI rules and it's bad practice. PCI applies, compliance, applies both to merchants and also to your, what I call the service provider, meaning your software that you're using or your terminals. Your terminals need to be secure and PCI compliant. Your software needs to be PCI compliant. It's basically a lot of these processing companies, they have a fee for going through a questionnaire to make sure that you're PCI compliant, and some of those questionnaires can be 200 questions long. You have to do it every year. Again, it's an unfortunate thing because questionnaires don't really ensure that you're truly compliant. Good practices and education is what ensures that you're PCI compliant. So PCI stands for Payment Card Industry. There's just a set of compliance rules. For example, Coreclear as a software company, we need to make sure that we're PCI compliant. So there's certain things in our software that we need to ensure, and even our practices on how we store cards, which we don't, right? We let the gateway store the credit card and we tokenize things. But you've got all of these different fees here. So, even though you might say, hey, I got this great rate, but at the end of the day, your statement will have a lot of other fees typically that are associated with transacting that business. So in terms of pricing models, I'm just going to, and Joel, how am I doing on time? I think
we got 9 minutes.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to rush it. We may run a little over. And Aaron, if you can just let Helen know, to let everyone know I may be late to my next meeting. But I don't want to cut it short. So, and I promise we won't go very long. We're almost at the end of this presentation. But this is important because there's different pricing models out there when you go looking for credit card services, or even looking at your own credit card services. There's 4 different pricing models that are typical. There's other pricing models, but I would say these are the most popular ones. There's what's called flat rate pricing, Interchange Plus pricing, membership pricing, and that should have said tiered pricing. So let's just talk about the flat rate pricing. So everyone knows Square, Stripe, PayPal. you know, they offer flat rate pricing. And what flat rate pricing is it's just very straightforward pricing, meaning I know exactly every transaction, what it will cost me, because I have the same cost across the board, right? And one would think that sounds like a negative, but we actually have some very large customers that prefer flat rate pricing because they can predict, you know, what their costs are. There's no surprises. And again, I'm not here to push any specific pricing. I'm just going to let you know how to shop it and, you know, what the pros and potentially what the cons are. The con of flat rate pricing is, you know, you may be way overpaying for a certain transaction, but at the same time, on some flat rates, you know, you're gaining because you're paying less, right? So if you look at, you know, flat rate price and, you know, we'll talk about the one that we offer of a 2525 is what we call it. So the 2.5%, 25 cents a transaction, you know, on some cards that sounds like, wow, you know, there's a huge percent amount that's being made. But if you start digging in, it's not necessarily the case. And in some cases, you know, the actual acquiring bank, the processor, right, is losing money, right? So it's a bit of a risky model even for the acquiring banks, because it depends on a mixture of credit cards, right? If for whatever reason your customer base is at a higher income level and they all carry reward cards, well, you know, that's where it starts getting interesting, right? So it's something to look at, right? And we'll talk a little more about flat rate pricing in a minute. But the flat rate pricing typically does not have any additional fees to maintain the account. So, you know, it's just literally, this is your price and there's no other fees. You don't have to worry about anything, and it's very straightforward and easy to calculate, right? So Interchange Plus is just looking at, you know, it's a cost plus model, right? So it's literally a straightforward model that basically, pardon me, let me turn this off. So it's basically a model that says, take whatever the cost is on interchange and mark it up by a certain amount, right? And you negotiate that markup. And part of that negotiation may be based on, you know, what services you're getting and, you know, some other different factors. Typically, you are paying some other fees because the acquiring bank has costs, you know, in terms of generating the monthly statements and, you know, several other costs involved. Interchange Plus, it's a good pricing model to follow, you know, especially, you know, if you're really looking to cut as much cost as possible, and you don't need any type of predictability, and you're a certain size.
And can I intersect or interject one thing on the Interchange Plus?
Absolutely.
So for those on Interchange Plus, a common tactic that credit card processors will utilize, they will tell you they could give you this extremely low rate. I've seen this many times already, where you could be maybe 10, 15, only 20 basis points marked up, and you're thinking you're getting a great rate. Well, if you didn't read the fine print, they're not giving you the actual pass-through rate, which you've got to watch when you're looking through and getting those quotes. Because what they will do is give you a very low quote and then mark up the actual interchange rate on the other side. So what would normally be from Visa, they'll pad it to another 30 to 40 basis points, as high as 1%. So you always need to also look out for that, because they will, and I've seen this, you know, very consistently, where they will pad and hide those rates within, even on an Interchange Plus model, where it turns out the 2.5% flat rate would actually be way cheaper for a lot of people.
Yeah, which is crazy. So again, it's more of a buyer beware, right? Unfortunately, it's a sad world. But you've got to literally do your own homework and then definitely review what you're being charged for and make sure it matches up to what the real interchange rate is, because Interchange Plus, quote unquote, are they really using interchange to, you know, for the actual cost? Are they adding in more interchange fees, quote, what they say is interchange fees. There's a newer pricing model that's becoming more popular. I'm personally not a fan of it. It's called membership pricing. You're paying a fixed monthly amount based on your volume, and basically you're paying interchange rates. Personally, I don't see the point of that. You might, if you're doing that, you might as well just pay an Interchange Plus model, because at the end of the day, on the membership, you're going to pay a lot of money, and I don't know what it really gets you. It I guess gives you a little predictability, but usually it's a higher monthly subscription. So it may work for certain businesses. It's definitely, if you've got, an offer out there, it's something, worth exploring. So there are some companies that are trying to simplify things, quote unquote, by providing this membership pricing.
And to interject one more time on the membership pricing, same thing on the IC Plus. They may tell you you're getting the true pass-through rate, but a lot of the times they're, again, not the processor, and therefore they have costs and markups that they say you're getting, but again, you have to carefully read your contract if they're giving you a contract and look through that statement in detail to really see if you're getting that true pass-through rate, even on a membership level.
Yep. So tiered pricing, if you hear the word tiered pricing, just run away. Wouldn't you agree, Aaron?
Say that again.
If you ever hear the word tiered pricing, just run away. That's the
run absolutely away. This is the biggest joke I've ever seen. So basically what they're going to do is they're going to give you the greatest markup on the best rate and continue to compound you over and over on what's called a qualified, mid-qualified, and non-qualified card type. So, they may show you this very low and appealing flat rate program that's like in the single digits, and you think you're getting a great, well, if you read the fine print, that only applies to a small amount of cards, and the rest of your transactions, you are actually paying, upwards of 3-4% on everything else, which again, read the contract, look through the rate and all that. And then we did get a great question just now. Do we do the true pass-through? Of course. Do you know why though, Ezra and Joel, why we do the true pass-through and why we're transparent with our pricing?
Why, Aaron? We
are a software company. We don't rely on credit cards to make money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we have, we're transparent. That's why the name Coreclear. We're trying to, and that's why we had this webinar. Our goal is to just educate, to try to provide some clarity, especially when it comes to merchant processing. Again, it's a confusing part of any business, and I think it was done purposely that way, so merchants can remain confused. And unfortunately, it's a big cost, and that cost adds up every month. So again, if you see tiered pricing, run away. Interchange Plus, that's always good to look at. Flat rate pricing, don't eliminate it, from your thinking, and I'm going to talk about it in a second here. Membership, I'm not a huge fan. Again, I think if you're doing a membership, yeah, it sounds great. I've got this fixed monthly, but at the end of the day, I think, I would opt for more of an Interchange Plus, unless that membership is giving you, something more. So just to bring at least my part of the presentation to a close, and Joel, I don't know if I ended up answering most of the questions that you kind of prepared up front, but let's just talk about what Coreclear is. For those of you who don't know who Coreclear is, we're a software company, as Aaron pointed out. We specialize in point of sale and e-commerce solutions. We found it necessary to provide merchant services. And as we work through the onion, we keep trying to eliminate layers and provide a much more transparent and easier to support environment. Because if you're running our point of sale, obviously if we're your processor, or at least the front facing of your processing side, we can actually also help, with any type of support issues a lot easier. So there's a lot of benefits to us offering this. The beauty with Coreclear is it's simple, flexible, and affordable. We have 2 pricing models, and I'll talk about those in a second. And you can actually get free point of sale software. And again, I'll address that in a second. One of the most important things, one of the most important takeaways is we'll do an analysis for you. And Joel, I think, is going to throw up an offer. We'll do just a free analysis for you. I mean, you don't have to go with our services. We'll take your current merchant statements and at least give you an idea of what are you really paying per month. What is your what's called an effective rate. So if you did $1,000 of credit cards, are you really at the 1.7% that they promised you, or are you really sitting more at a 2%, right? And we'll be happy to help you with that. Again, there's no obligation to do that. We don't believe in the hidden fees. We don't believe in increasing interchange rates and hiding behind numbers. Our whole goal is just, again, it's still an onion. I can't reduce all of the layers, but we're doing our best to try to do that. So again, we offer 2 simple plans. We have a fixed rate plan. It's the 2525 program, and our software is free. Our software for the firearms industry includes everything from a brick and mortar store standpoint. We offer a full point of sale, inventory control, bound book, everything that you need. We are extremely feature rich. We update our software on a regular basis. And in general, Core Store, which is our point of sale software, we've made it what we consider an affordable price. There's no upfront fee, setup fee, and it's either $99 or $199 per month. $199 is what most stores would need that have more than 1 register. So $199 is unlimited registers, and $99 is a single register, geared more for the smaller brick and mortar stores. Our fixed rate plan is available for anyone doing $10,000 or more a month on credit cards. We are just launched this. The idea is that with a fixed plan, you'll get free software that covers obviously our support costs. You get unlimited support, unlimited amount of training, unlimited ongoing fixes and maintenance and enhancements. So it's all rolled into one simple plan. Now, I know this will sound funny. I don't even know if we're going to make money on this plan. I sure hope we do make a little money. But when you're dealing with credit card processing, you're really dealing with what's called a basis point. Now, let me real quick tell you what a basis point is. A basis point is 1/100%, right? So that translates to 0.0001 of a dollar, right? 0.0001. It's 100%. So not 0.01, 0.0001. That's 3 zeros. So, when we're dealing with basis points, I mean, we're dealing with, very, very little money, right? But our goal is to expand Coreclear and grow even way beyond the firearms industry. We have a big plan, and we don't look at individuals, we're looking at the total, and we're trying to provide a good service for a great price and a great product. So that's our fixed rate plan. And again, it may fit you, it may not. We'll help you analyze that. We'll help you with that decision. We also offer Interchange Plus. Again, those are typically between 5 and 30 basis points is the cost plus, right, Aaron? Am I saying that properly?
Yep, correct.
So that's 0.05% to 0.30%, which again is 0.0005 and 0.003. Joel will give you the math test at the end of this. So again, with our Interchange Plus, there is a monthly fee, but it's fixed. There's no additional hidden fees, and there's a per transaction fee that's on top of that interchange. Again, we'll be glad to talk to you about all this. The webinar for me was really to try to at least provide a little more clarity on the whole credit card processing world. Again, 1%, half a percent, a tenth of a percent, if you're doing $100,000 of business a month, can add up. Everything adds up, unfortunately. And this is the problem I have with, these days with technology. There's, a lot of solutions that I like to consider, the one-trick ponies. It's, you need something for recurring charges. You need another service for your waivers. You need another service for this, and it's $10 here, $20 here, $50 here. And that doesn't sound like a lot per month, but when you start adding it up and you look at it on an annual basis, a $20 expense per month is $240 per year, and that's a $1,200 expense every 5 years. Those numbers really add up. So it really behooves you to see what you can do to consolidate, and try to find solutions that, hopefully will help you eliminate, some of those, again, what I consider the onion layers. And it's not just about cost. It's also being able to get good support, not get this, right? The finger pointing game. So again, we can work with any of your current software providers. We hope you choose us as your software provider, but if you want to use us just for credit card processing, that's perfectly fine. If you're using another software and it's a better fit for you, that's great. We'll still be glad to work with you with any of your credit card processing needs. So Joel, do you have any follow-up questions you wanted me to answer before we bring this to a close?
No, I've got a basic understanding now, but if anybody does have questions, you can download the file that I shared and email Aaron. And he is the absolute expert when it comes to this stuff. He will walk you through it. He'll open your eyes to things. So shoot him an email, and that email address is included in that file that I shared.
Awesome, Joel.
Yep. And Joel, did you put up an offer?
Yeah, that's the file I shared. So they can they're going to contact Aaron with any questions, and that's where they'll be able to take advantage of that.
Awesome. And did we talk about the giveaway before we let everyone go?
You saw my email today, and you'll be in the running for the Lenovo tablet and the credit card reader.
Yep.
So stand by for that. We're going to draw. We're going to draw probably tomorrow morning after we get everybody's emails together and do a little.
Yeah, and I think we had a good turnout. So why don't we give away 3 of these? So.
Oh wow, golly, that's awesome, man! That makes me great. I'm not even getting anything.
Yeah. So I want to. Do you see my screen or?
Yeah, we see you.
We see you.
Do you? Let's see. Let me share my screen real quick.
Okay.
Because I want to show everyone what we're talking about. So can everyone see my screen with the VP8300?
Yes.
Yep.
So I wanted to talk about, again, this is really applicable if you're using CoreStore. So hopefully you'll look at CoreStore for your point of sale solution. But if you are a brick and mortar store, we do have different terminals that you can get. Our preferred terminal is what I call it's a faceless terminal, right? It's this VP8300. And the reason why we like this terminal is because typically we attach it to an 8-inch, it can be bigger, but typically we'll put an 8-inch tablet in front of the customer that acts as the customer display, as opposed to using a proprietary, Deja Vu, PAX, and Genico, those, I call those dumb terminals. And the reason why I call them dumb terminals is because they really don't do a whole lot. They don't show the consumer all the detail that they'd like to see. And Joel, I don't know if you can bring up on your screen in a second, I'll stop sharing. Maybe you can show our setup if you can pull the photo of the setup with the customer display. And I'll talk real quick while you pull that up about this unit. So this unit supports dipping the card, the EMV. It supports contactless. It supports swiping the card, right? So contactless is, you'll see on a lot of cards, you'll see these little lines, the circular arcs that I'm pointing my mouse to. That means that you don't even have to dip your card in. You can just hold your card right on this machine, right? So that's contactless. And then of course it also supports Google Pay, Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, right? So again, it's a nice unit. It's a heavier unit. It's in terms of it will sit on your counter really nicely. And it has all of the key features that you would want. Again, it has no face, right? So it doesn't show the consumer, you know, what the transaction amount is, which is where you would use what I call the traditional legacy terminals. But with CoreStore, we've got the best of all worlds. So we've got a very cost-effective card reader that does everything. It looks beautiful on your counter. So, you know, again, basically, if you're using CoreStore, the nice thing is it's a full, the point of sale system will run on anything. So whether it's on a tablet, on a phone, on a desktop, on a Mac, it will run any of those. And then typically you'll have another unit of some sort that acts as your customer display. And we'll pull that up here. All right. So that's just a sample setup. This was Mad Dog Armory. So we've got the customer display. You'll see the VP8300 down here. You've got a receipt printer over here. Again, on this display, it doesn't act just as a dumb display because the customer can sign. They can actually, if you do support tipping, they can put their tip amount. The customer can be graded. So we actually show, if it's a choice, you can see the customer name and how many loyalty points they have. So it's a really nice but very cost-effective setup. So the combined cost of these two things is usually, right, Aaron, less than like one of those PAX units.
Yeah, it's cheaper than most of the Deja Vu units you can get.
Yeah, so this roughly is around, you know, 250, depending on what tablet you get, but it's less than $300 for this whole setup, and it's a nice setup. And again, when I say the whole setup, I'm not talking about the printer or the tablet behind, but the whole customer display credit card terminal. So it's a really good selection in terms of hardware. So if you're interested, we are going to have a webinar on CoreStore coming up. I think it will be in a couple of weeks. I don't know if we've actually selected a date, but we'll definitely be running through an entire webinar on CoreStore. And if there's enough interest, we can definitely have another webinar on merchant processing. We can talk about convenience fees. We can talk about PCI more. We can talk about other topics. If you have other topics that you want us to cover, if you want us to pull up, Aaron, maybe a good thing for a more detailed webinar is we actually look at a statement sample.
I can whitelist some.
Yeah. So I think that might be really good to do. So great. Any other questions, Aaron? I know you've been monitoring the chats. Hopefully everyone got their questions answered. Contact us via email, phone, or snail mail. That exists.
Yep, and I've already got a couple of statements already emailed to me, so I know what I'll be doing after this.
Yeah, and those are pretty quick for us to turn around, by the way. So we've got some tools that we enable us to really analyze your statement and not just a cursory look at it. So you'll get a pretty detailed report back from us. And please feel free to contact us with any questions. We're here to help. We're here to clarify. And I appreciate everyone attending this webinar. I apologize for running a little late, but I think, I don't know, I think it was good, right, Joel?
Yeah, it was necessary. It really was. A subject like this requires a little more time.
So Joel, in all honesty, do you feel less confused or more confused? Be honest.
Less confused.
Okay, good. All right, that was my goal, and I'm using you as my measure.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for attending, and we will hopefully see you in our next webinar. Please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We will post this webinar up on the YouTube channel. We'll probably just eliminate the short pause we had in pulling up the image. But other than that, I don't think we'll edit much. And then again, if you're interested in the actual PowerPoint, if you want a copy of that, just let us know, and we'll get you a copy on that. I'll fix the couple of issues that I saw as I was going through it, but we'll send you a copy of it.
Awesome.
That sounds great. So everybody be on the lookout. 3 of you are going to be having one of those nice setups sent to you. So look out for that email tomorrow.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.